They took him when he was about 12, dragged him out of his village in Osogun, pushed him into a line with other children, then they sold him like property. For the men that were doing the buying and selling, this was just another boy for the slave ship. They had no idea that they were carrying the future first African Anglican bishop and the man who would help to put Yoruba into writing. Because somehow, by some miracle somehow, that same child who was chained and shipped across the Atlantic, he would be rescued by a British anti-slavery ship, taken to Sierra Leone, learn to read and write, become a scholar, a priest, then return to West Africa as Bishop Crowther, preaching in the very language that he helped to shape. If you read what I just said in a novel, you think this author is doing too much. But this was Ajayi Crowther's real life. He was born around 1807 in Osogun. His name was just Ajayi back then. Life was normal until one of those slave raids hit his area. Soldiers raided the village, grabbed children and adults, and Ajayi was thrown into it. He was sold again and again until he ended up on a Portuguese slave ship that was headed towards the Americas. But that ship was stopped in 1822. The British had banned the slave trade and they were capturing illegal slave ships on the Atlantic. They freed the Africans on board and they took them to Sierra Leone, a place where they used to resettle people that were rescued from slave ships. That's where Ajayi's life took a turn that nobody could have predicted. In Sierra Leone, he wasn't just another rescued child. He was given a chance to study. He learned English, he learned to read, to write, he started going to church, and in 1825, he was baptized and given the name Samuel Crowther. He later said that even after escaping physical slavery, he felt like he was still in another kind of slavery, spiritual slavery, and becoming a Christian freed him from that. That was genuinely how he saw it. He studied so well that the missionaries noticed him immediately. He went to Fura Bay College, one of the earliest higher institutions in West Africa, and he wasn't just an average student, he was exceptional. That was where the early seeds of linguistics started for him. He had a natural gift for languages. By his 20s, he was already a teacher, a schoolmaster, and someone that the missionaries trusted with real big responsibilities. And then in 1841, he joined a huge project, the Niger Expedition. The expedition was to explore the Niger River, encourage legitimate trade, not slave trade, and spread Christianity. A lot of Europeans on that trip, they died from malaria, but Crowther, he survived and he helped as an interpreter and cultural guide. That expedition, it changed how the church missionary society saw him. They realized that African missionaries were the key. In 1843, he was taken to England and he was ordained as a priest. He came back to West Africa and he joined missionary teams in Abeokuta. And this part of the story is wild, right? When he got there, he found his mother and sister, the same family that he was taken away from as a child. He reunited with them after more than 20 years. He even baptized them. While doing all of this, he started shaping Yoruba as a written language. Before then, Yoruba existed only in spoken form. Crowther worked on the grammar, the spelling system, how the language should look on paper, In 1843, he published one of the first Yoruba grammar books. Over the years, he translated Bible passages, hymns, prayers, everything, all into Yoruba. He believed that if people were going to understand Christianity, then they needed to hear it in their own language. Decades later, in 1884, the full Yoruba Bible was published. That work, it shaped Yoruba literacy for generations. Even today, Yoruba spelling and structure, they still follow the foundations that he helped to create. By 1864, he was consecrated as the first African Anglican bishop. Europeans were shocked. Some supported him genuinely, some were confused. Some were just angry. One missionary even argued publicly that no African could ever command respect as a bishop. But Henry Venn, the CMS leader at that time, he pushed Crowther forward because he genuinely believed that African churches should be led by Africans. As bishop, Crowther traveled constantly, the Niger Delta, the riverine communities, inland areas, places that Europeans couldn't easily survive. He worked with African priests and teachers from Sierra Leone and Yoruba land. He built churches, schools, mission stations. He believed that education was as important as preaching. If you wanted a strong society, you needed literacy, not just sermons, And to a lot of people, Crowther, he was a symbol, a black man leading a black church, doing intellectual work that scholars respected internationally. Oxford University, they even gave him an honorary doctorate. But this is where the story enters its complicated side, not because of anything he did, but because of the times that he lived in. The late 1800s was when The scramble for Africa was heating up. Europeans were dividing the continent like cake. Missionaries who once believed Africans should lead themselves, they suddenly changed their tune. Some of them decided that Africans were not ready for leadership, even though Crowther had been doing this job for decades, and racism showed its full face. Younger, newly arrived white missionaries, they started undermining Crowther's authority. They accused African priests under him of mismanagement, and they used that to attack Crowther's leadership. They said that Africans couldn't handle responsibility. One CMS official even wrote, "The Negro race lacked every sign of ruling power." That was the climate that he was dealing with. Investigations were launched. Crowther's decisions were questioned. Europeans took over his mission statements. It just became clear that they wanted him out. In 1890, at more than 80 years old, Crowther resigned. He left quietly with dignity, but everyone close to him knew what had happened. He had been pushed out by racism, not by failure. He suffered a stroke soon after and he died in 1891. And the moment he died, CMS, they immediately replaced him with a white bishop. The experiment of African church leadership was over, at least in their eyes. And yet, his impact did not disappear. He shaped Yoruba language permanently. He trained African priests who later inspired independent African churches. He planted the seed of African Christian identity at a time when Europeans were trying to keep control. He became proof that Africans could lead, translate, teach, build institutions at the highest level. But people still debate the other side. Some say his missionary work helped colonial influence grow. Some say Christianity overshadowed Yoruba traditional beliefs because people like him framed those traditions as idolatry. And depending on who you ask, all of these views can exist at the same time. Crowther's life is exactly that, a life with two sides. A boy stolen into slavery who came back. He came back to educate millions. A bishop who built something powerful but lived inside a period that changed his culture forever. His story is not simple, but it's real, and it shaped Nigeria in ways that people still feel today. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like stories like this, please follow me. I tell these stories all the time.